Hey, welcome to episode 183 of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. I'm your host Jason Freeman, and today I have a guest who's doing phenomenal work in this world. It's it's challenging because so many of us love being in nature and love the beauty of nature, and at the same time we love technology technology and it's hard to know how to balance the two and create sustainable solutions. My guest today has devoted his career to thinking about this, to teaching about this, and to putting this into action. I'm very proud to bring him on, and we'll do so in a minute. But first, this.
Today's guest, Dr. Craig Spencer.
Okay, my, you've been seeing my guest the whole time. Will you wave, Craig? that was not usually supposed to happen. So you have a sneak peek at this week's guest. Now let me tell you a little bit about Craig. Dr. Craig, as his students call him, became so hooked on the outdoors that he majored in biology and geology and on his master's and PhD in freshwater ecology. After attaining his doctorate, Dr. Craig and his family moved to Montana, where he did research at the Flathead Lake Biological Station for 5 years. Well, in Montana, his whole family fell in love with the mountains, lakes and residents of western Montana. The rest of his career was spent teaching at Augustana University in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where that he fell in love with the prairie, a landscape that is often overlooked because the beauty within it is much more subtle than the dramatic nature of mountains, forests, and oceans. Please welcome to the stage, even though he's already been on the stage for the last 3.5 minutes, Dr. Craig Spencer.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, Jason. Thank you for inviting me.
You are welcome. So since you're so into nature, you must have grown up in a very natural place, huh?
You know, it's kind of interesting. I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in a suburbia, USA. And so our playground there was like going down to the creek, which started in the sewers in my neighborhood, the street runoff. And we could still find a few things there, but my real love of nature was originated spending every summer as a kid growing up on my mom's family ranch in Texas. And it was magical. They had a lake and a stream and horses, and I spent all day catching frogs and fish and critters that I'd never seen before and learned about them. And I was hooked for life right there.
So as a kid, you really lived in two different, two totally different environments. So what did you learn first of all about life and about nature from living in a suburban environment?
Well, I realized that if we pave over everything in nature, that we were losing a lot. And I found that, sure, I could find things to do in the city that I liked, but where I really recharged my batteries and got inspired about the world was when I was in a more natural environment. And I think, I was lucky that I had that ranch in Texas to go to, so I could experience the rejuvenation I got every summer.
And this was your mother's.
Yes.
Your mother's. Who was it? Your mother's.
Well, my great grandfather settled the ranch, but then my grandfather, and then had my mother, and so that was the lineage.
Was it a working ranch?
Yes. Yes, they had cattle and sheep and goats, and still do. My cousin is running the ranch now.
Well, do you have a specific memory where you first got hooked on nature at the ranch? Like where you first went, wow, this is magnificent.
I started going there when I was so young. I do have one memory when I was in the Boy Scouts, and my uncle would kind of help with some of the Boy Scout merit badges, because I couldn't go to scout camp because I was down on this isolated ranch in Texas, and I was working on nature merit badge, and we had to make plaster casts of 3 different species. And I quickly found a deer track, and I quickly found a raccoon track. So I had 2 of them, but I was having a heck of a time finding that 3rd track. And I remember I saw this unusual looking track, and I didn't know what it was, and I made a plaster cast out of it, and it turned out to be an opossum. And just the excitement of being on a quest like that, and then with a satisfactory ending. I don't know if that was the single moment, but it's one that is indelibly etched in my brain, how excited I was to find that opossum track. So.
That's beautiful. You bring up an amazing point about nature. We can kind of think in the modern world that we know everything about nature, and just that it's all been discovered, but things are constantly being discovered in the natural world, huh?
I think every project I've ever worked on, Jason, I've learned a lot, but I realized that there was so much more I didn't know about whatever ecosystem it was that I was studying. There was so much more yet to learn, which made it exciting and challenging too, because there are always challenges.
What are some of the challenges of discovering?
Well, I remember when I was in college, I was thinking about being a marine biologist. And so I went to Duke University Marine Laboratory for a semester my junior year. And in the course of spending a semester at this cutting edge research laboratory with world famous marine biologists, I realized that the ocean was so big, marine biology was so big, I could never understand it all. And so I decided I was going to focus on lakes, because I thought, well, they're small enough, probably figure it all out, put it all together. And I realized that was pretty naive too. But I've enjoyed studying freshwater. And then since I've come to South Dakota, I've fallen in love with the prairie. So it's been a blessing to be able to study a variety of different ecosystems.
When in your life did you know you wanted to pursue biology and ecology?
Well, when I was, it's just what I always enjoyed, being outside with nature. And I thought, gosh, I hope I can figure out a career where I can continue to enjoy nature. And I remember when I went to college, a small liberal arts college, I thought, wow, this would be pretty exciting to have a career in this kind of environment. And it took a little while to get there, but I found it at Augustana. It's just been a beautiful 30 years there, in this stimulating environment with college kids, and basically taking them on expeditions down to the creek to catch frogs and fish. And basically it's what we do. And then they have to collect a little data and they have to write it up and read a little bit about it to put it together. But in some ways, I just feel like a little kid when I'm back out taking students or friends or anybody out into this beautiful world of nature that we have. There's so many marvelous things to see and learn about and experience. And it's pretty low stress in nature most of the time.
What would you say to someone listening who's like, I hear you, Dr. Craig, and I want to to enjoy nature, but whenever I go out there, I find it kind of boring a little bit.
Well, I think that's a good thing for someone to learn. And what I've told students for years is, I hope you're as lucky as I am. I hope you're as lucky as I am to find a career where you're doing something that you've loved since you were a little kid. And so go out and find what do you love doing, and then try and figure out how you can chart a path so you can make that into your career. And so it's not like what I'm doing is for everybody. I've had plenty of students that, weren't comfortable at all, and then they're swatting flies and they're, just uncomfortable. And I think it's good for people to learn that too. And so.
But if someone's listening and they're like, I want to cultivate and enjoy a taste for being out in nature and start to enjoy it more, but I don't know where to begin, where would you suggest they begin?
Oh gosh. Try and find somebody who knows a little bit about it to take you for a hike, or take you fishing, or go for a walk, or go birding. Go out with somebody who can teach you a little bit. I had plenty of students over the years at Augustana that were taking ecology because it was a requirement. It's like, oh, Dr. Craig, this is a lot better than I thought it was going to be. This is kind of fun. So reading about it in books, watching videos, never really cut it for me. I think I would just encourage folks to find somebody who knows a little bit about it, and go for a hike. There's plenty of bird clubs and flower clubs, and the Nature Conservancy site. There's courses at the state parks, where you can go on a wildflower walk or a bird walk, or take a class at the outdoor campus, and just try and hang around some people that can teach you a little bit about, and share their joy and their love of it.
The books and the videos are good, but they're just not the same, huh?
Not for me. I can't speak for other people, but I kind of get bored with the videos. It's like I want to get out there and see that myself. It's like,
speaking of getting out and seeing, literally today before we talked, you went out on the prairie, and it's April 9th. What was your experience like today?
So today we were on a quest to find past flowers, and a friend of mine said he'd had a relative that had a farm up north of Sioux Falls and he thought maybe there were some pasque flowers blooming. And so we spent all morning traipsing around his farm, and finally we climbed up on this ridge, and it had a bunch of rocks, and the field was unplowed. And I'm thinking, okay, I think this is going to be the place. And sure enough, this ridge top had never been plowed. And there were pasque flowers blooming all over the place, and it was magnificent.
So how would you describe what a pasque flower is and its importance to someone who's never?
So the pasque flower, I didn't pick any out in the prairie, but we have a urban prairie in our yard here today, in Sioux Falls, and these are pasque flowers from our yard. It's the earliest native flower that blooms in South Dakota. Just beautiful, usually around Easter time. And it's kind of interesting that.
Will you please hold them directly at the screen so we can see the tops? Oh, yeah. That's so beautiful. So what's interesting about them besides that they are amazing?
The Spanish word for Easter is Pascua. So I think it's pretty cool that it's basically, to me, it's the Easter flower because it blooms at Easter time. It's the first flower to bloom in the spring, and you can see the shape of the flowers here is kind of like a collecting, like a globe. And so usually it's cool, and so it's warmer in there because the heat builds up in there. And the butterflies were swarming around these in our urban prairie here just now. It's the only thing around that has any nectar for a pollinator. And so it's important that there's this progression of wildflowers that bloom starting from now into the fall. And so this is the first one. So it's always exciting. It's a sign of spring to me, the best sign there is.
Have you seen them like in melting snow at sometimes?
I have. They're often coming up through the snow, and that doesn't bother them at all. They do just fine.
What an image of resilience, a flower coming up through the snow.
It really is. Yeah, we had snow like a week ago, and it was all packed down, and the pasque flowers had already come up. And then when the snow melted, took a day or two to kind of get their act back together, but pretty soon they were in their glory again.
So after growing up in the DC area and your summers in Texas, you went to college in Maine, right?
Yes, I went to Colby College in Maine.
How did you choose that?
Oh my gosh, it was different back then, Jason. We just had the counselor's office in the high school. There was no internet or anything, and I was just flipping through this book about colleges, and I can't even really remember. I might have liked the pictures of Maine, and it looked kind of neat, and read about this school, and I never visited it till the day I showed up for freshman year. It was the first time I'd seen it, and I was pretty lucky. It was on a beautiful location out in the foothills of the mountains there in Maine, between the coast and the mountains, and it was great.
What did you enjoy as a student about the small liberal arts education?
Well, I was kind of shy back then, and I think if I'd gone to a big university, I would have just been swallowed up. I never would have said anything and wouldn't have gotten to know professors. But in a small college, you get to know your professors, and I just like that the stimulating academic environment, but we also had a fun time. And I mean, I think it's not that small liberal arts colleges are the only place you can have a fun experience and successful experience. But for me, I think it was the best for my personality.
Being up in Maine, how close were you to the Appalachian Trail?
Oh, we were about an hour drive. So
Did you hike on that at all?
absolutely. We were at the northern end. So Mount Katahdin is the northern end of the Appalachian Trail. So we were about an hour drive and then about a 3-hour hike to get up to Mount Katahdin. So.
Wow. And then you went to grad school.
Yep. Then I migrated out to Michigan State University, which is a fine institution for learning about freshwater ecology. And so I was there for my master's and my PhD. And then my first real job was out at the University of Montana. And I was mostly doing research there, which was very stimulating, learned a lot. But all the while I had in the back of my mind this dream of this teaching at a small liberal arts college. And so it took a while to find that, but I finally did.
So freshwater ecology, like the layperson knows that there's fish, and fishermen know more because they're out fishing. But what are some things that the common person probably doesn't consider about freshwater ecology that are fascinating?
Well, my master's project at Michigan State, we were studying how to treat sewage effluent as a resource rather than a waste product. So our sewage effluent goes down the toilet, goes down the sink, and then it goes to a wastewater treatment plant. And then, for example, here in Sioux Falls, after it's treated, it just gets dumped into the river and kind of as a waste product, and which isn't always the best thing for the river. So my master's project at Michigan State University was to take that sewage effluent, and we ran it into these holding ponds. And then those ponds were very, very green and productive with plants and so on. And so then we were harvesting the plants and then using those plants as fertilizer and mulch. And then when we were done with the water, it was used to irrigate golf courses. And so that's kind of what my graduate work was about, trying to recycle, reuse what had been just a waste throwaway product, because there's some real value in that wastewater. And so that was kind of my initial foray into trying to live more sustainably. How can we use this as a resource that will help sustain us instead of just as a waste product to throw away and pollute the river?
Did you plant the plants somehow?
They just came in naturally. If you have a body of water and there's a lot of good stuff in it that makes plants grow, they'll find it. So.
Oh, so you didn't have to seed anything?
No.
Wow.
Fish. We put the fish in to begin with. But
Oh.
everything else came in naturally.
Oh. So with a little intentionality and a little creativity, you were able to come up with what could have been a harmful product to the environment, harmful waste in the environment to something that was useful.
Right. And nowadays, that's not that unusual. In southwestern U.S., sewage wastewater effluent sometimes costs more than freshwater, drinking water, because golf courses are using it to irrigate their golf courses. And not only do you get the water, but you get things in the water that make plants grow well. And so it's treated more as a resource now than it was. And we're slowly getting there in South Dakota. Slowly.
So your master's project was kind of like a trend-setting project almost.
Well, it's not like it was just my idea, Jason. I was one of many that was working on this. So,
but how nice is it to be part of this effort?
oh, exactly. Yeah, it was a real world problem that we were working on and trying to come up with a beneficial use, more sustainable use of the water that goes down the drain. So,
Speaking of sustainable uses, so this started. You were teaching a course in during the January term at Augie, which is called the J term, and you were teaching winter ecology, and what problems did you run into with that?
oh gosh. So I was teaching a course called Winter Ecology and Outdoor Adventure. So we were studying winter adaptations of plants and animals and how they survive the winter. Some migrate south, some hibernate, some burrow down in the mud, all different amazing adaptations. And then for the outdoor adventure part, we were teaching students about snowshoeing and cross-country skiing, and we'd build snow shelters and sleep out. But then after teaching this for a number of years, we had a couple of winters with no snow, and it was hard to teach that course without any snow. So one winter I was trying to think of anything I could do with ice because it was cold and everything was frozen. So we'd drill holes through the ice out in the lakes and collect water samples and so on. And then for the adventure part, I took them down to the falls, Sioux Falls, and taught them how to ice climb. Students were all having fun, enjoying this, and we were kind of wrapping things up. And these two police officers came up and said, "What the heck are you guys doing?" And I kind of explained what we were doing. And they said, "Well, it's actually illegal to be ice climbing here." And I said, "Well, I didn't see any signs that said no ice climbing." And they said, "Well, it's actually an ordinance in Sioux Falls from the bridge above the falls to the bridge below the falls. There's no contact with the water allowed." And we got to talking, and they were kind of on the same page with me in a way. They said, "Well, the only reason we came down here is some ladies called and said there's some idiots down there doing something on the falls. So we figured we better come investigate." So they said, "Well, you can go ahead and finish up, but probably shouldn't be doing this anymore." So after that experience, and then I started looking for ecosystems a little further south where I didn't have to rely on snow to teach my January course. So we ended up in Guatemala. So that's another story.
There's a lot of stories in Guatemala. So let's start with the first year you went to Guatemala. What was the experience like taking students to a new place for the first time?
Oh my gosh. My philosophy in teaching evolved over the years. And initially we would read papers and talk about all these overwhelming environmental issues, and I just could see it in the students' eyes, and actually in my own eyes. It's kind of depressing when you try and take on these huge environmental issues. So I decided midway through my career I wasn't going to focus on that anymore. I was just going to focus on getting students out into the field, whatever an ecosystem it happened to be. Expose them to these amazing ecosystems, teach them about it, have them learn about it. And then I think, and seeing it in action, the students are more likely to care about it and maybe do something about it once they learn about it and kind of learn to love it and appreciate it than just reading about it. So students have been reading about tropical forests and all the issues with cutting down the forests. So when I took them down there, for the first time, and we did a 40-mile hike, 3-day hike through the forest, camping out in the forest, it's just the magnitude of the trees, these huge mahogany trees that the whole class could hold hands and not even reach all the way around, and those spider monkeys up in the canopy and flocks of parrots flying by. It's just hard to describe. It's got me all choked up just talking about it right now.
And some of these students, I assume, had never had an opportunity to be out in nature that much.
No.
So what are some typical reactions to a student who hasn't been in nature once, hasn't been in nature much, suddenly being in a rainforest?
Well, we're like just a little kid again, just the sense of awe and wonder, and it's all new, and it's incredible, and you're just wondering if there's a jaguar behind that tree over there, and you're hiking through the forest with guides that are descendants of the Maya civilization, and it's just a whole kind of almost an out-of-body experience the first time. It's just hard to imagine that an ecosystem like this exists, especially coming from the prairie,
When you took that first class to Guatemala, was that your first time seeing that particular rainforest?
Well, I'd scouted it out the year before, so I'd been down there poking around and setting things up, but that was the first time I'd been. So, man, I was learning a lot. When I first heard howler monkeys, I thought they were jaguars. It was kind of scary.
Yeah, that confusion could cause some anxiety.
But then what was most rewarding, really, Jason, about that experience was having the students meet some of my heroes. Now they're working down there trying to fight for preserving the tropical forest, because it is being cut down. There's lots of pressures, and as I mentioned, indigenous Maya people, it's been their homeland for thousands of years, and they're fighting hard to preserve it. And so just the students learning about that and then coming back here, we're all trying to work together, trying to help to continue to support our friends down in Guatemala that they're facing enormous challenges trying to preserve that beautiful, beautiful forest system. It's really providing a environmental service to the whole planet. Those tropical forests are taking carbon out of the air, they're storing it. A lot of the medicines that we have are derived from organisms in the tropical forest. And so it's really a global resource that we all should be concerned about right now.
So in recent years, you and other people at Augustana University had this vision of making January travel courses carbon neutral. How does that vision of carbon neutrality relate to what you're doing in Guatemala?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, to get to Guatemala, we fly down there, and flying, air travel, it has a large carbon impact on the environment. And so not just from our course, but other study abroad courses in January, going to Norway and India and Vietnam. And so we calculated that J-term travel from Augustana, from the 150 some students, was generating about 38 metric tons of carbon dioxide spewed out into the atmosphere. So I didn't really feel good about that. And so we started brainstorming, what could we do about that? And I suggested, instead of a January term, let's just take a whole year and we can hike down there or ride bikes, but nobody else seemed to go for that. So, but there's actually, starting after the first Earth Summit in Rio in 1991, people started talking about carbon offsets. That sure, the best thing would be to just cut off whatever you're doing that's emitting carbon. The next best thing is to facilitate if you're emitting this much carbon, if you can facilitate the storage of that much carbon in the earth, then they kind of offset each other. And so there's actually a global market for that of about $38 a ton. So the math worked out to about $10,000 to offset our carbon footprint from 38 metric tons. And so we raised through donations $10,000, and working with our partner in Guatemala, that's the BioItza, this organization of Itza people that are managing a tropical forest reserve. We sent that money to them, and they're using that to plant trees, to hire more guards to protect the forest, and to acquire some additional land. Because without outside help, that forest is going to be gone. And the beautiful system there that's storing tons and tons and tons of carbon for us is going to go away. So we say that our air travel is carbon neutral, because we're supporting projects in Guatemala that are helping store that same amount of carbon. So Augustana, I'm retired now, but Augustana decided to continue that program, which I'm excited about. And so in 2024, air travel from study abroad at Augustana is also carbon neutral. And it's supporting conservation efforts in the tropical forests in Guatemala to continue to hopefully store that carbon for us.
About how many years have you had this project going?
So this is the second year.
Wow. So in the few options when we confront environmental things, one is just being ignorant about it, or not being aware, and like when you and other people calculated the amount of carbon on the air travel entailed, that seemed like the first step, just that awareness. And
Right.
So that moved things forward. I guess then the options would come, and one of them, and a lot of us get afraid of this one, is just saying, oh no, we can't do January abroad because it's impacting the environment, and just have to stay home. And that option can be downright scary, but instead of that, you said, oh, this is happening, and what can we do that creates a win-win? And what a win for the organization down there, and what a win for the Augie students. What else would you say about creating environmental win-wins?
Well, so the other project that I'm passionate about is we've done a lot of work restoring prairies. And prairies, these beautiful, rich, black topsoils that led to the breadbasket of America being in South Dakota and Iowa and the Midwest, is the result of this beautiful tallgrass prairie ecosystem. And every year, a tremendous amount of carbon is being stored in the soil. Every year, that grass dies back and it lays down on the ground. And then over time, over thousands of years, all of this plant matter has gotten turned into black topsoil. Problem is, most of the prairies have been plowed over for farmland, for agriculture, which, we need food and can't argue with that, but we've kind of taken it to an extreme. So the tallgrass prairie is one of the most endangered ecosystems on the planet. There's about less than 1% is left. And so I started working with my students to work on restoring some of these prairies. And so we have a little prairie down at Newton Hills State Park that we've been working on. And as I mentioned, we're working on a project right here in our yard to convert a lot of it to native prairie.
When you say talk about the project in the state park, what is involved in restoring a prairie, keeping it healthy?
Right. So down at Newton Hill State Park, it's a hilly topography, and historically the valleys were forested, but the ridge tops were prairie. So the prairie fires would sweep off the plains to the west, then onto these ridge tops, and keep the ridge tops in prairie, whereas down in the valleys were protected from fire, and so there was forest there. So in eastern South Dakota, without fires, there would be no prairie. It would all be forested. So the prairies relied on frequent fires. And so the problem down in Newton Hills and elsewhere, if you look around, if nothing is done, the forest will encroach into the prairie. And so we were studying this one beautiful ridge that was not affected by invasive species. It was all native prairie, and it was just beautiful in this ridge top. But the forest was slowly, the shrubs and trees were slowly encroaching, and the prairie was disappearing. And so that was a useful exercise for my students to be studying that, because they'd go out and they'd run a transect across this ridge top and document what kinds of plants were growing, and then they had to write a report about it. And the last part of the report, I asked them, it's like, well, if you were the park manager, how would you manage this? And they all said, we should burn it. We should clear the trees. We need to get the prairies disappearing. And so after 15 years of reading these reports, Jason, I thought, well, they're getting it. But I felt kind of bad. It's like, well, we're documenting the disappearance of this remarkable ridgetop prairie. And so I went up to the park manager in 2009 and I asked Mark Steck if we could adopt this ridgetop, and he said yes. And so starting in 2009, we started clearing the shrubs and trees, collecting seeds from native prairie plants and collecting past flower seeds and planting them. And now we have a beautiful ridgetop prairie down there. But it takes effort to keep it healthy. There's a lot of invasive species that we're working on continually, trying to keep it healthy. And
did you end up burning that prairie at a certain point?
We did. We used to work with the park to burn it. But there are so many regulations now, Jason, that they're not really, they said, Craig, the paperwork that they need to go through to get proper authority to burn it is like this much paperwork. And for a small ridge top, they said it's just not worth it. So now we're down there just cutting the brush. That's what I'll be doing next week, probably. Take classes down there.
You've mentioned invasive species several times. What are invasive species doing to the remaining prey?
So if you look at just any grasslands in eastern South Dakota, if humans haven't been involved with restoring it, it's all going to be almost 99% of it will be invasive smooth brome grass, which is a European grass. So in all the roadside ditches, most of the CRP land, most of the game production areas are just almost exclusively smooth brome grass because it's very invasive and it outcompetes the native grasses. And also Kentucky bluegrass is mixed in there too. So in order to get the native grasses and the native prairie plants back, you've got to either start over completely, kill everything, and then reseed it, or just work to keep the invasives out. And that's what we're doing down in Newton Hills, because this ridgetop prairie had been surrounded by forests. So as I mentioned, that was one thing that was attractive to us, is there weren't very many invasive species there because it had been kind of protected by this surrounding forest.
But now there are some.
Yes, it's little patches are showing up here and there, and garlic mustard and buckthorn and leafy spurge, and there's always something.
So you'll have enough for your students to do when you do.
Yeah, I'm retired now. I've got lots of work to do down there. So if you want to come help, maybe listeners want to come help, give me a holler.
Sounds good.
Then the other prairie project is within our yard. So
what has that been like, creating a prairie project in your yard?
Well, when I learned that turf grass is either the first or second largest acreage of cultivated plant in the United States. So turf grass and corn are kind of right up there, depending on what figures you use.
Wow.
Isn't that mind-boggling?
Wow.
And it's this monoculture. This is not, it's not useful for wildlife or pollinators. It's not particularly attractive to me if you've seen a prairie. And it takes a lot of fertilizer, watering, chemicals, mowing. So the environmental impact of this monoculture of boring green grass is just kind of it's an environmental disaster, the way most people, right now I walk down the sidewalk and there's fertilizer spread all over the sidewalk, because most of the spreaders now are these broadcast spreaders that just spew it out. And so a lot of that stuff is ending up washing into the river anyway. So we just decided we're going to convert our lawn to native prairie. And so about 10 years ago, we started on this, and it's one of the most fun, satisfying projects I've ever been involved with, because right now our prairie is expanding. We have lots of natural reproduction. So we've given away hundreds of prairie plants. It's beautiful any time of year. In the wintertime, we've got these 6-foot tall grasses that are sticking up through the snow. We've got butterfly milkweed plants that the monarch caterpillars are out there on them. We have birds. And just today when I was out getting these past flowers, they were just covered with butterflies. There's nothing else blooming right now. Well, I don't know what those butterflies would have been finding for nectar if there hadn't been past flowers nearby. And our prairie is storing carbon in the ground. So I think it's another one of those win-win situations. And I think some of our neighbors think we're crazy, and others look forward to walking down our sidewalk and seeing what's blooming throughout the seasons. So it's
Your house probably, your yacht has probably become a destination for some people,
I think so.
bringing delight.
Yeah, we got an award from the city of Sioux Falls a couple of years ago. The mayor has a beautification award for residential. So our urban prairie won that award. So we have a little plaque out there. We have a sign out there too, educational sign, kind of explaining what we're trying to do out there with our urban prairie. Very, very satisfying. And hopefully it'll catch on. Because the thing is, once it's going, you don't have to water it. You don't have to fertilize. You don't have to mow it. There is some work with weeding. As I mentioned, these invasive species are always trying to move in and take over. So
you even get invasive species in the city, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Might be dandelions and Kentucky bluegrass and creeping Charlie and so.
Oh, so you mentioned that you used to spend a lot of time with students, kind of reading the text, and it caused a lot of doom and gloom about the future of things. What is your attitude towards the future now?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I struggle with it sometime more in the past than I do now, Jason, because I just decided that nobody can take it all on. I was kind of naive back in the early days. Well, I'm going to learn about the entire ocean and learn everything about it. Same thing with these environmental issues. They're in some ways they're just too much to even try to wrap your head around it. And so what I've tried to do is just pick, one little thing. We've got a little prairie down at Newton Hill State Park, and we're just working hard to try and rehabilitate that, restore that, keep it healthy. We have an educational sign down there. It's on the Woodland Trail. And one of my favorite things is to work out in our urban prairie here. And some people might say it's kind of putting the blinders on to these other bigger issues, but I figure if everybody just took on, a few little projects like this and worked hard on them, it could only make this world a better place in the future. And so that's kind of what keeps me going. I'm optimistic about, the things I'm working on, and if just hoping that it's other people will do the same, and other people are doing it. It's not like I'm the only one. There are lots of people that are taking on incredible projects, and if we all kind of pitch together, we can hopefully have a bright future here on the planet for our kids and grandkids. And
you mentioned the rancher you get buffalo meat from as a hero.
Yeah, so another one of my heroes, got some heroes done working on the forest in Guatemala, but Dan O'Brien is another hero of mine. He's a writer, but he's also started this company called the Wild Idea Buffalo Company in western South Dakota. And he's using buffalo or bison in a very environmentally sustainable way. It's his business, but these bison are also crucial, along with fire, to restoring prairies. And so by raising bison, they're fertilizing the soil, they're reducing invasive species, their grazing activity stimulates higher biodiversity, and they're also providing meat that provide income to his ranch. And so I would take my students out there to visit his ranch, and he'd show us the neighboring fields without bison, where they're still plowing and trying to grow crops in western South Dakota, which doesn't work very well. They kind of look like a wasteland. And then you look at Dan's pastures with bison, and there's just very diverse community of grasses and wildflowers and bison grazing and pronghorn antelope and burrowing owls. It's just like you go from almost a desert to this magnificent short grass prairie ecosystem. And so he sells his meat through the Wild Idea Buffalo Company. And so I like to support that operation.
You also like to bike and ride a lot when you're bike and walk a lot when you're in Sioux Falls. I mean, obviously that saves on gas, but how does that benefit your enjoyment of life personally?
Oh, I've never liked getting in a car and driving. I just never really have. If I can walk or bike, just out in nature, people that put headphones on when they're out riding a bike trail, I just don't get it. You hear birds, and maybe you'll meet somebody interesting and see some new wildflower. Or when I used to walk to Augie, sometimes I'd be kind of preparing what I was going to do in class on my walk over there. So.
I ask all my podcast guests this next question about what imperfect best means to them.
The perfect.
What doing your imperfect best means. I ask each one of my guests that. To me, doing my imperfect best means I envision the best I want for my life and for the people around me. And when mistakes or obstacles come up, instead of being stopped by them, I learn from them and move forward. What does doing your imperfect best mean to you, Craig Spencer?
Well, I think I mentioned when I was a little kid, I was shy and was not one to speak up very much. And so I've kind of pushed myself to overcome that. And I mean, to me, there's nothing better than teaching. It's a beautiful thing to pass on, just to generate excitement in any age, whatever it is, to pass on some of my love and passion for nature. It's a beautiful thing to see students get interested in something that I've shown them or taught them. And there's a Senegalese poet who said, in the end, we conserve only what we love, and we love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. And so I hope that, in the teaching, the time that I've spent with students out in nature, they're going to learn to love and conserve some of the beautiful things on our planet.
May that be so. Sounds wonderful. Thanks for all the work you do for your appreciation and love for nature, for what you do to preserve nature, and for all you do to teach students teach students about appreciating nature and about conservation and about sustainability. Thanks so much, Dr. Craig.
Oh,
Thanks for being on the show.
You're very welcome, Jason. It's been a real pleasure to spend this time with you.
Well, just it's so powerful to hear about people's journeys and how they're doing things to find love and joy and creativity in the world, and in helping the world become more beautiful place for future generations, and some of that is preserving the beauty that's here, and some of it's creating new beauty, and Dr. Craig is definitely doing that, isn't he? How inspiring. Just very inspiring, and I'm very grateful for him, and I'm grateful for you tuning in today. Thanks so much for being you and what you do to enhance your own life and the lives around you and life for future generations. Tune in for another episode next week. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.